Hello and welcome. We are here for another episode of All Fired Up with Braden Ramsey, and we are live today from KS Bar and Grill in Lexington, Kentucky. I'm hanging out here for the week for the SEC tournament. A lot of the other KSR crew are down in Nashville, or they'll be heading there shortly, but I'm holding down the fort here in Lexington again, coming to you live from KS Bar and Grill today for All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. And we have a lot to talk about, obviously, with the SEC tournament tipping off in about half an hour with Arkansas and South Carolina getting things started today down in Nashville at Bridgestone Arena. And we're just going to dive right into breaking down the SEC tournament. We're going to talk about some of today's matchups. We're going to kind of pick the games going forward, talk about the teams that I think can ultimately cut down the nets in Nashville and what it may mean for the NCAA tournament going forward. But starting with that very first game between Arkansas and South Carolina at 1 o'clock, there are some pretty interesting bubble implications, not just with that game, with two other games happening today down in Nashville in the first round of the SEC tournament. It seems like that there's a consensus that Arkansas is going to be in no matter what, but I know this, I would not be very comfortable between now and when the SEC between now and Selection Sunday, if I were Coach Calipari and the Razorbacks, if they were to lose today to South Carolina, that obviously would not be a very good loss for the Razorbacks, and they need to get some revenge against Coach Lamont Paris and their group as well. So I think if Arkansas wins, then yes, they're obviously certainly in the NCAA tournament. But if they were to lose, I think things could get a little uncomfortable for the folks there in Fayetteville. Sticking with some of those bubble implications today, in the second game at Bridgestone Arena, you have Vanderbilt taking on Texas. And this is a Texas team that desperately needs at least one win, maybe even two, to really solidify themselves in the NCAA tournament field. But I would say that if they were to happen to lose today to Vanderbilt, then their NCAA tournament chances are essentially gone to the wind. I don't think that Texas can get in with a loss because they're already probably on the wrong side of the bubble. But if they were to win one today, a decently quality win over Vanderbilt in Nashville, then I think that you would be in a position where Texas could play their way into the NCAA tournament. It'll be interesting to see if they were to lose today, what the implications may be for Coach Rodney Terry going forward if he ends up being on the hot seat down there in Austin. Game number 3 today is Mississippi State against LSU. This is one, not a whole lot of implications in terms of the bubble. Mississippi State is comfortably in the NCAA tournament. LSU is, they're going to have to cut down the nets in Nashville in order to go dancing. But then in that final game of the evening, the one which a lot of Big Blue Nation will be tuning into, between Georgia and Oklahoma, obviously with the winner taking on the Cats tomorrow evening in Nashville. Georgia's in the tournament, especially with the way they've played down the stretch, winning their last 4 games. This Oklahoma team is about as on the bubble as you can be entering in SEC tournament play. I think that if Jeremiah Fears and that group can get a win today over a surging Georgia team, they'll find themselves dancing come Selection Sunday. But again, kind of like Arkansas, with a loss, it would be very, very uncomfortable over the next few days if you are a fan of the Sooners. But I have been a fan of the Sooners, especially since Kentucky played them out in Norman. I think Jeremiah Fears is one of the best guards, certainly one of the best freshman guards in the country. I think this team is one that, let's not forget that they went 13-0 in non-conference play. That wasn't it wasn't the toughest non-conference schedule of all time, and I know they've certainly had some faults throughout the way in the Southeastern Conference schedule. But this is a very talented Oklahoma team, again, led by Jeremiah Fears. And I think that it's a group that if they were to, I think they can make a run potentially in the SEC tournament and win a couple of games. But then they're a team that, if they do get in to the NCAA tournament and as a 10 seed or as an 11 seed, I think they're going to make some people pretty nervous when that selection pops up. If you're a 6 seed or whatever, I would not want to have to face number 11 seed Oklahoma in the first round. So, as I said, 3 of these 4 games tonight in Nashville are really going to have some legitimate NCAA tournament implications. Again, to some extent Arkansas in the very first game. If they win, they're definitely in. If they lose, probably gets a little uncomfortable. Texas is probably on the wrong side of the bubble currently, with Oklahoma being on the right side, and that can obviously turn with games this evening, and especially with we all know what a gauntlet this Southeastern Conference has been, and that'll remain true in the tournament, where every single one of these wins is a high quality win. These are quad one games that you're playing for the most part on Wednesday of the SEC tournament, which is certainly unheard of. But that's the situation that these teams find themselves in this year, and it'll certainly be true for Kentucky, where most likely every single game that they play down in Nashville will be another quad one opportunity for the Cats as they look to continue to add to their excellent NCAA tournament resume. But just to pick these 4 games here that are happening today in Nashville, I'm taking number 9 seed Arkansas to get past South Carolina in that first game down in Nashville. I think that Vanderbilt will take care of business against Texas. I think that it could be towards the end of the time for Coach Terry there in Austin. Things have just not gone very good for him, and I think this Vanderbilt team, they're just pretty darn good. Like I did not see it coming, and I think that we gave them a lot of accolades throughout the year. They still ended up just being the 12th best team in the SEC. That just shows how loaded it is, because they have had an excellent year. I think Mississippi State will probably blow the doors off of LSU. I don't think this LSU team has the talent to keep up with the Bulldogs there. And then probably the most interesting game of the day, and again, the one that we'll be watching as Kentucky fans to see who we play tomorrow evening. I think Oklahoma is going to beat Georgia this evening. Again, I like the individual pieces, how good they are in one-on-one situations. I think they'll be able to handle the athleticism of Georgia as well as anybody, and I like that matchup for Oklahoma this evening, and I think the Sooners will move on. So then if you're just projecting out a little bit further, that means that the first game on Thursday at noon Central, 1 Eastern in Nashville will be 8 seed Ole Miss against 9 seed Arkansas. I think the Rebels will take care of business there. I think they're too good defensively, and I think that Coach Chris Beard will move on to the quarterfinals. I have Texas A&M playing Vanderbilt then in the next game. Vandy obviously essentially playing a home game there in Nashville at Bridgestone Arena. But I think that just the chaos that the Aggies can cause, and I've talked about it a lot this year on the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show, on this show, in a lot of written work. I legitimately I don't respect the play of Coach Buzz Williams' team a whole lot. I just don't like watching the mass chaos that they cause on the court. But I will say, and I've said it all year, legitimately credit to him, they are as good at it as anybody, not just in the country this year, but probably ever, of just like, hey, we're not very good at basketball, but we can offensive rebound the ball almost half the time. We can get out and pressure you and cause turnovers and go score that way. We're going to put our head down and get to the basket and shoot free throws. And they do that as well as anybody in the country. And I think that against a Vanderbilt team, they'll be able to kind of speed them up, and the pressure will get to them over the course of 40 minutes. Texas A&M will advance. Then I have Missouri against Mississippi State. I think Mississippi State has a real chance to win this one. I think this team, we probably have forgotten how potent they can be offensively. And we've seen down the stretch here, Missouri maybe kind of starting to come back down to earth a little bit. I actually like Mississippi State to pull a little bit of an upset there, seed-wise at least, and move on to Friday. And then in the Kentucky-Oklahoma game, that's, as a Kentucky fan, that's going to make me uncomfortable for about 24 hours leading into that one, because I do have a lot of respect for Jeremiah Fears and Porter Mosier and this Sooners squad, but I do think it'll be the end of the road for Oklahoma. I think Kentucky will find a way, just like they did out in Norman. I think that they'll find a way down there in Nashville to advance. So that would set up a quarterfinals of Auburn and Ole Miss. Auburn obviously playing their first game of the tournament. They get to wait around until Friday to play. I think that the end of the season probably did not go well, honestly, for the rest of the SEC, because now Coach Bruce Pearl has been able to yell at these guys in practice for a week or so about these last 2 losses, and being able to kind of reinvigorate them with the fire of like, hey, I know that we won the league. We won maybe one of the best leagues in college basketball history, but You guys just lost 2 in a row, and you now still have something to prove here, certainly in March, because we haven't done anything yet. I think he's probably reiterating that message to Janai Broom and company there at Auburn, and I think that'll probably be enough to propel them on to the semifinals. Then we're going to have Tennessee against Texas A&M in the quarterfinals, the 4 versus the 5 seed. I think that Tennessee, they're just too good defensively. I think they'll be able to bottle up Wade Taylor IV enough to win that one. Then Florida against Mississippi State. I continue to say I think Florida is one of the most complete teams in college basketball this season. Once you get past, obviously, Auburn and Duke, and then probably Houston has played their way into that very, very top tier, I think that Florida is the most complete team after that. Because you look at teams like Alabama, excellent, as high of a ceiling as anybody in college basketball. And obviously they can put up 100 points on anybody on a given night. But I just don't know, even though their defense is probably better than people give it credit for, I think that the defense is probably not good enough to ultimately cut down the nets. Conversely, I think the opposite side of that is true for Tennessee. I don't think that they're good enough offensively to cut down the nets. And I think that Florida has that very good balance in between those two of being a top 10 KenPom team, both offensively and defensively. And I think that led by an All-American type player in the backcourt of Walter Clayton Jr., Elijah Martin, a guy that's played in a Final Four in the past, Will Richard, a veteran guy, and then certainly Alex Condon, and what they've gotten out of the production of their front court this season. I think Florida will advance. And then I think that Alabama will beat Kentucky for a third time this season. Unfortunately, I just don't know if Kentucky can quite keep up to that pace, especially with Kirk Reese and Jackson Robinson out for the season. I just don't know, like, can Kentucky really go score 100 on this Alabama team, which it would take to win? I'm not sure if that's in the cards for this version of Kentucky. So that would set up a semifinal, a very, very chalky semifinal of Auburn versus Tennessee and Florida versus Alabama. I think it'll then ultimately be Auburn versus Alabama in the championship game. And I think that Alabama has a real chance to cut down the nets here again because of what they can do offensively, where they just have enough margin for error when you can go score 100 against these teams. So I think that Alabama will be cutting down the nets at Bridgestone Arena this year. And I think that ultimately that'll once again work out for Coach Bruce Pearl and Auburn, who I still think is the favorite to win the national championship this season, that Bruce Pearl can go and tell his guys, hey, you finished the regular season losing to 2 SEC teams. You didn't win the SEC tournament down in Nashville. So, like, you guys still have something to prove if you want to be remembered as one of the great teams in college basketball history, because you have one of the great resumes in college basketball history, but there's still a lot to prove. I think that he'll be really driving that home going into the NCAA tournament. But it is interesting how, in a lot of ways, the SEC tournament is going to be more difficult for these teams than the NCAA tournament, because you look at some of these matchups on Wednesday, like, you look at Georgia, Oklahoma. Well, that's a better opponent than a lot of people are playing in the first, maybe even the second round of the NCAA tournament. Like, if you're 1 seed Auburn, you're not playing a team like that until you get to the Sweet 16, most likely. Or even if you're a 2 seed like a Tennessee or an Alabama, you're not playing teams of that quality until you get to at least to the round of 32 and probably even to the Sweet 16. And it's just it's just yet another feather in the cap of this year's Southeastern Conference, that in order to cut down the nets in Nashville, that will require you beating more quality teams, most likely, than your path to cutting down the nets in San Antonio in about 3 to 4 weeks. But we're going to keep it short and sweet here because we are here live at KSR, or at KS Bar and Grill. I'm going to let some people get back to eating their lunches, and I will get set up here to watch Arkansas versus South Carolina at 1 o'clock. But I wanted to go ahead and talk about the SEC tournament just a little bit today and bring you this episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. If you are on the YouTube channel, please make sure you are subscribed. Let's see. Travis is in the comments here. How many games Auburn have to win? Let's see. For those teams that start on Friday, so Auburn, Tennessee, Florida, and Alabama, those teams would just have to win 3 to win the tournament. Kentucky and the teams that play on Thursday would have to win 4. Then obviously the teams that play today, the 9 through 16 seeds, those guys would have to win 5 games. Thanks for chiming in there, Travis. I hope your meeting at lunch went well today. And my dad would say, get back to work. But anyway, if you're watching here on YouTube, please make sure you are subscribed to the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel. We'll have another episode of the podcast out on Friday. We'll have these live episodes every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern time throughout the March Madness run. And for everything college basketball related over the next few weeks, no better place to be than on my Twitter account at BRamseyKSR. So go give me a follow there. Hope you enjoyed today's show. Hope you enjoy the rest of Champ Week and the SEC tournament specifically. Go Cats, and have a great day watching college hoops.